Good morning. My name is Jim Karagianis, and I'm the Liberal critic for Veterans Affairs. I want to thank you for coming out today. I have with me a variety and people from the veteran community. Wear differing hats, and they will talk to you about post-traumatic stress disorder. They will talk to you about the veteran centers closing, the 9 VAC centers that are closing that are affecting 26,788 people. I will also be talking to you about some files, medical files that have gone lost. But at this point in time, I want to turn the mic over to Rob Thibault with the Aboriginal Veterans.
Thank you, Jim. Good day. First, I would like to acknowledge that we are on unceded Algonquin land, and I thank the Algonquin Nation for the privilege of speaking here today. My name is Robert Thibault. I am the president of the Aboriginal Veterans Autochthon. I am here today on behalf of my membership, as well as with the concurrence of my First Nations Veterans of Canada president, Grand Chief Percy Joe in BC, and the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples National Chief, Betty Ann Lavalley. On March 12, 2012, the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, in their first session, an Aboriginal Association member who claimed to be the voice for all Aboriginal veterans and serving members was asked the following question: do Native veterans need services because they might be living on a reserve? His response to that question was no. The response from this individual gave the illusion that there were no problems with any of these veterans. That response was absolutely incorrect and certainly not supported by the First Nations Veterans of Canada. As I stand in front of you today as a Métis veteran, I can assure you that I would never have made a statement regarding any First Nation veterans group without first speaking to representatives of that group. I can certainly say today with feedback from veterans that there are unresolved issues from the past yet to be resolved appropriately for on-reserve veterans. As far back as the War of 1812, alliances were set up between First Nations, Métis warriors, and Canada. We must remember that at that time there were very few British regulars, and there was a requirement to have an alliance with First Nations and Métis in order to maintain those borders that we hold today. During both World Wars, Canada's Aboriginals enlisted and fought, and their numbers per capita in relation to other ethnic groups in Canada was the highest. At least one newspaper in Britain recognized that contribution, and in both World Wars, 7,000 First Nations enlisted and served. These numbers do not even account for any Métis or Inuit. Why is this piece of history important for Canadians to remember? What was in it for the Aboriginal peoples? What did Canada give them when they came home and returned from the battlefields? First, the government enacted a Soldier Settlement Act in 1917, as well as a Veterans Land Act in 1942. These acts were designed to give tracts of land to be farmed. In Western Canada, for example, 85,000 acres of land was acquired from Indian reserves, and land was given to the Soldier Settlement Board. That land was then later given to non-Aboriginal veterans. The commercial lands of Hudson's Bay and the Canadian Pacific Railway were economic booms for the country, and those were untouchable. Certificates of possession, or location tickets as they were called, were given to First Nations veterans returning to their reserves. However, that land was already part of the reserve, and in some cases, if the band felt they could honor those certificates, land was given to those veterans. Understand that the land was already on the reserve, administered by the Crown, and did not include any fee simple ownership that we enjoy today off reserve. Allowances for veterans' family were based upon the spouse and how many children were left behind. Non-Aboriginal families received anywhere between $65 and $95 a month. Big money in those days. Aboriginal families' allowances were put under control of an Indian agent and were cut down to an average of about $35 a month because the agents considered the larger amount of money could not be handled appropriately. Transfer of Aboriginal veterans' responsibility from Veterans Affairs to Indian Affairs, as well as control of entitlements of benefits. Information on all benefits entitlement was not readily available to Aboriginal veterans. However, returning veterans of non-Aboriginal status had that access to that information. Métis veterans also suffered in this time, as they were told they had to go through Indian affairs because of the color of their skin. These only outline some of the shameful acts against Aboriginal veterans and their family, and also the impact that it played on the reserves in question. Those Aboriginal veterans who fought side by side with their comrades in arms only to be discriminated by successive governments from the country they served. Overseas, they were considered equals. At home, they once again became Indians. The National Council of Veterans Association provided research document in 2006, and NAVA also presented the same concerns during an appearance before the Standing Committee in March 2008. Nothing has improved, nor has been corrected. The new Veterans Charter, of which all parties of the government unanimously supported at the time it was introduced in the House of Commons, was also supported by key senior officers of the Canadian Armed Forces. It is certainly evident now that this charter needs a serious overhaul. The financial compensation in some cases falls short of meeting the needs of some veterans and their families. The Aboriginal Veterans Autochthon, along with their partners from First Nations veterans and the Congress of Aboriginal People, will work diligently with the Veterans Senate Committee and with the Royal Canadian Legion Consultation Group to address all pertinent issues of the Charter that will ensure those servicemen and women are cared for by a country that has sent them into these foreign lands in the service of peace and stability. Anyone returning from operations severely injured or physically or mentally wounded must be looked after for life. Those sacrifices cannot be whitewashed away, and government must take this responsibility seriously and leave no one behind. Finally, Sergeant Tommy Prince, one of the most decorated First Nations veterans who served in both World War II and Korea, was one such soldier left behind dying on the streets of Winnipeg. We must never, ever let another veteran fall, lest we forget. Excuse me, I'd like to introduce Medrick Kuskuzino, who will talk about Pause for Thoughts, a very outstanding program, and he's the master behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Retired Medrick Kuskuzino. In 1986, while in military operations in the North Atlantic, I received injuries that resulted in myself being subsequently diagnosed with an injury known as post-traumatic stress disorder. The injury is not new. It is nothing that we haven't heard of. Since before the First World War, we've had the diagnosis of battle exhaustion, lack of moral fiber, a very repugnant term considering that Thane McDowell, one of our Victoria Cross winners in Canada, was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a devastating injury that's affecting many of our troops in the new veterans world. After the Gulf War, Somalia, Rwanda, Bosnia, operations in Haiti and Afghanistan, Swiss Air disaster, there are many veterans that are suffering the ill effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a complex mental injury that encompasses things like depression, anxiety, panic, suicidal ideation, rage, anger, trust issues, night terrors. In 2012, through the generous support of the Royal Canadian Legion, I was able to be paired up with my service dog, Ty, who by November of 2012 was having a very major impact on my life. Subsequent to that, with the support of my family and friends, I undertook an initiative to help raise both funds and to advocate for other veterans getting the gift that I had. Over the past summer, I walked 1,065 kilometers over 50 days through communities in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario. As a result of that, I've subsequently been able to assist in the pairing of 11 veterans to date with their service dogs, and we have several more in the works. There currently exists a cohort of over 100 veterans with PTSD, yet at this moment, Veterans Affairs Canada has not chosen to reach out and start to find out the dramatic impact that these dogs have made on our veterans' lives. In closing, I would like you to sum up with just one very simple number: 0. 0 represents the number of veterans with PTSD that go on to hurt themselves after being paired with a service dog. This one number, a number that we can live with, underscores why we should be pursuing this particular alternative as soon as possible. I'd like to turn it over now to Daniel Drapeau of Pause for Thought, one of the gentlemen who I was able to give a new leash to life with, and his service dog, Kenya. Thank you.
Bonjour, mon nom est Daniel Drapeau. Pendant la guerre de Corée, tous les vétérans qui ont été blessés avaient une décoration, une feuille de laurier qu'ils portaient sur leur manche d'uniforme, je crois. En 2001, le gouvernement a décidé que tous les vétérans qui avaient été blessés dans des théâtres opérationnels auraient droit à une décoration, la médaille de sacrifice. Par contre, tous ceux-là, entre la guerre de Corée puis 2001, qui ont été blessés dans les mêmes conditions, on se fait dire que notre sang n'est pas bon. On a été estropiés, on a eu les mêmes critères, mais on n'a pas le droit à médaille. Pourquoi moi j'étais prêt à risquer ma vie pour mon pays, puis ils ne veulent même pas me donner une médaille pour me remercier? Merci. Sorry, so the GPC, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, hi, my name is Barry Westholm. I'm a recently retired Sergeant Major from the Joint Personnel Support Unit, Eastern Ontario Region. And Jim, thanks for having me here today. But I want to make it clear that there's a better place that I'd like to be, and it certainly isn't here. I'd rather be in uniform behind my desk or out with my troops in the Joint Personnel Support Unit. However, I wasn't able to stay in that position because of the way that unit was managed. It was ethically immoral for me to do so. So I resigned in protest for what was going on in that unit, and most specifically in that region. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got here today. When the JPSU first started forming up back in, I think it was 2009, I heard about it, and I thought, this is a great unit. It had all the things going for it that I think we needed in the past, so I really wanted to be a part of it. And they were looking for people. But it was a very unusual unit, and they wanted specific people. They wanted people that fit a certain character type, people with experience. And so when the word went out, I applied. And it's very unusual, again, in the Canadian Forces to apply for a position. Normally you're posted. So I did apply, and more unusual still, I had to go through a vetting process and then an interview with 3 officers, which again is very unusual outside of Special Forces. So I thought that they were really taking this seriously, as they should. I was very fortunate enough to get the position of Regional Sergeant Major, and I was the first Regional Sergeant Major for that unit. Very early on in the life of the unit, it became very apparent it was being a victim of its own success. The amount of people that we were getting into us were overwhelming the staff, and it carried on in that general direction up until the point I resigned. When we started out in the Eastern Ontario region, we had about 100 people, which was manageable. On my release, in protest, it was upwards of 500 people with the same staff. In one IPSC, or platoon, in Kingston, there was one platoon warrant officer looking after 70 injured and ill soldiers and their families. And in the JPSU, being unique, the oversight doesn't stop when he's still in the military. When you get released, there's still follow-up. So those other jobs were also his to do. In 15th of January, a master corporal there committed suicide. He was one of those 70 people that this one warrant officer had to look after. And I'll say again, this one warrant officer was also one of those people that applied for the position. Supremely competent, lots of experience, a Singler, great guy. And then he was burdened with the numbers and unable to